What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another World Cup 2022 fantasy video. In this one, we're going to go through 10 of the best value players that you should be considering for your Matchday 1 draft, why they're good value, what their prospects are, and how they're shaping up for the group stage. So if you enjoy this video, make sure to give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and let's jump into it. So we'll start off with Maehle. Now, I played Euro 2020 Fantasy, and he was an absolute legend in that game, so I'm hoping the same will happen in the World Cup. When you play fantasy football, some of the most fun picks are those cheap attacking defenders, and that's exactly what he is. He's only 4.5 million, and as you can see from the numbers on screen, he's played 31 times for Denmark, already got 9 goals, 6 assists. 5 of those goals came in World Cup qualifying. I think in the Nations League, he got 3 assists as well. So he is extremely attacking, either as a left wing back or a left back. They do usually play 3 at the back, but they can change to 4 at the back in certain games. And the goals and assists per 90 are 0.52. So every other 90 minutes he gets for Denmark, he gets 1 return, either a goal or an assist. So he's the exact type of player that you need in your squad, especially in a game where defenders get more points than both forwards and midfielders for goal. I think it's 7 points. So he's a really decent prospect. I think there's lots of good value picks in defence, even up to like 5.5 or 6 million. There's lots of good defenders, but I think for 4.5 to enable you to spend more elsewhere, you've got to look at him. Denmark are a pretty solid team as well. They've got France in their group. That's going to be a tough game, but they did keep a clean sheet against them and beat them twice in the Nations League. They got a clean sheet against Croatia in that group as well. So I think the likes of Tunisia and Australia will be pretty good matches for Denmark, and for 4.5 million, you can't really go wrong with Maehle. So really happy to say that this video has been sponsored by Opta, in particular their Opta Analyst site, which is going to have a bunch of free-to-play games over the World Cup, including Opta Quiz, which is live quizzes during the tournament, Opta Challenge, which is a match day predictor game, and they're going to have some prizes, but the big one that you're going to want to check out by clicking that link in the description below is the Opta Million. You have a chance to win £1 million just by predicting what's going to happen in the World Cup. For a game that's completely free to play with £1 million up for grabs, it honestly could not be easier to submit your predictions. For the group stages, you just drag and drop each team into who you think is going to finish first, second, third, and fourth. So for Group B, for example, I of course think that England are going to win that. So I'm going to drag them to the top, Wales second, USA third, and then Iran in fourth place. For some of the groups, it's quite easy to pick the winner. Everything else gets a bit more trickier. So for Group E, for example, I do think that Japan are going to finish bottom, then Costa Rica in third place. But Spain and Germany is really hard to call. Obviously, Germany have got some exciting players like Sané. Havertz is going to play up front as well. Musiala should get some games too. So they could finish in first place, but Spain have also got a really good chance. And then in Group D, I think France definitely looked like the favourites, but Denmark beat them twice in Nations League, even kept a clean sheet in one of those games. So it's not necessarily as easy as it looks, but when it's completely free and there's a lot of money up for grabs, there's no reason not to try and predict it. And once you've predicted the group stages, you just scroll down and start predicting the knockout games as well. Now, those matches will be pre-populated based on what you picked in the previous round. So I'm going to go for England to win in the round of 16 against Senegal. But in the quarterfinal, unfortunately, to get knocked out by France, I do think it'll be a step too far this year. I hope that's not the case. But in my prediction, I have gone for France. I've gone for Brazil versus Spain, Germany to beat Portugal, and Argentina to beat the Netherlands as well. In the semi-finals, it gets very tricky. I think any team that's got Mbappe can cause another defence problems, and Germany will put up a good fight, and I think that game could be quite close, but I'm going to go for France. And in the other one, I hope it works out like this, it would be Neymar versus Messi, and I think Messi will get the win there and go through to the final. I've given Brazil the match in the third place, obviously playoff, and then it's Argentina versus France. That game would be Mbappe versus Messi. For a lot of people, Messi is already the greatest of all time, but I think some people just need him to win the World Cup to just fully kind of justify it, and I think this could be his year. It's probably going to be his final World Cup. What a story if he could get that win. So Argentina is who I'm going to go for against France. Then you just submit it, and that is it. Completely free to play. £1 million up for grabs. As I've just shown you, it could not be easier. Click that link in the description below. Make your predictions. See if you can beat me. So next up is Richarlison, and his record for Brazil is pretty damn good. In 38 appearances, he already has 17 goals and 7 assists, and he does appear to be their starting centre forward. Now, obviously, when we pick players, we have to take fitness into account, and he has recently had an injury with Spurs, but towards the end of the first half of the Premier League season, he was back making appearances for Spurs, so hopefully he'll be okay for Brazil. I had a look at recent starts, and in 6 of 8 games during qualifying, he started, and he also also started 3 of the last 4 friendlies. So obviously they have other really good players. You know, Gabriel Jesus could play there. But in recent games for Brazil, Richarlison seems to be the first choice centre forward. And obviously they got other players you could pick for fantasy. Vinicius Jr., obviously great, and Neymar as well. But they're 10.5 million, 3 million more than Richarlison. And they might end up getting more points, but it's whether or not they'll get more points for the money they are versus what can you do with that cash elsewhere. So obviously if you've got 3 million lying around, you just pick Neymar or Vinicius Jr., whoever you prefer. But if you don't and you want to spend that money in other positions in your forward line or midfielders or defenders, as long as he starts, Richarlison could be excellent value at 7.5. I think Lautaro Martinez is a little bit like Richarlison, where in isolation versus the other forwards around the 7.5 to 8 million price point, he's a pretty good option, but everyone else is talking about the superstar in their team. So for Richarlison, everyone's talking about Neymar. For Argentina and Martinez, everyone's talking about Messi instead. But it all comes down to how much money do you have to spend. And if you've got a team where you really like your defence or you really like your midfield, and you can't have Mbappe, Neymar and Messi, you've got to make some downgrades. Someone like Martinez could be a really good option. Argentina are the favourites for the group. They're going to be obviously the favourites for each of those matches as well in match day 1, 2 and 3, and they should be able to get plenty of goals. So I really like him as an option. His own personal numbers are proper decent, 0.85 goals and assists per 90 minutes. So nearly, not quite, but nearly for every 90 minutes he plays, he either gets a goal or an assist. And you can see his record, 40 appearances, 21 goals, 7 assists. That's pretty good. He should be nailed on as well. 8 million, a pretty nice price. So I had to pick at least one English player for this video, and I've gone for Kieran Trippier, just 5 million. He could be a bit of a bargain, and things seem to just be falling in place for him right now. He's playing for Newcastle, are doing excellently in the Premier League, not just him, but the whole team. I think for most people, if you ask them right now who has been the best right back this season, most of them would probably say Trippier. And look, he would have been in the England squad probably no matter what, but with Reece James injured, it does mean that Trippier is likely to get more minutes. Now, the one thing that I would say that other people might not agree with, I don't know if Trippier is 100% nailed on to start every single game, and the reason for that is Kyle Walker. Now, if England keep playing a back 3, which they probably will for most games, I'm pretty certain Kieran Trippier will be the first choice right wing back, because Southgate just doesn't trust Trent Alexander-Arnold, and Walker will play right centre back. Walker's not going to play as a wing back. He's not good enough when it comes to the attack, but in a back 4, Walker could definitely be the right back. So it's not guaranteed that Trippier will play every game, but in the matches he does play, he should be fairly attacking and also take a lot of the set pieces. If you want a player that is absolutely nailed on in that England team and is still fairly attacking, then Luke Shaw is probably the one. I just have a feeling that when they both play together, Trippier will be the better fantasy option. I think either of them for 5 million are definitely good for your team in match day 1. So sticking with defenders for a second, I've gone for Borna Sosa at Croatia, who's only 3.5 million and should play left back for them. Now, one of the things to consider with this kind of format of fantasy is you do have substitutions. So if you make a pick that's maybe slightly risky over minutes or something like that, you do at least have the opportunity to either not sub them on if your players have done really well, or to sub them off if they play a little bit earlier in the match day, right? So he's definitely one to consider. At club level this season for Stuttgart, he's already got 8 assists, and in 8 games for Croatia so far, he's at 1 goal, 1 assist. So 3.5 million, it doesn't really get much better than that. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good defenders in the World Cup game, and even from like 5 to 6 million, it would probably be worth getting a few of them. But again, if you want to set your team up where you're spending more on attack in midfield or forwards, and you need some cheaper defenders, he's probably one to be looking at for that price. Croatia, not necessarily favourites for the group. That will probably be Belgium, and that will be a tough game in match day 3. But in match day 1 and 2, they got Morocco and Canada. There's definitely points in there for Croatia and for Sosa as well. So if you need a cheap defender, he's probably the best one at 3.5 million. If you think there's anyone that's better or as good as him, let me know in the comments below. So this is one of those picks where we're definitely going to have to keep an eye on fitness and injury-related news going into the match day 1 deadline, because Trossard is definitely not nailed on for Belgium. The way they play with the back 3, you have their forward. Obviously, usually Lukaku, if he's not fit, it'll probably be Batshuayi. Then you've got 2 players behind, De Bruyne and Eden Hazard. And if Eden Hazard isn't fit to play in match day 1 or maybe even match day 2, then Trossard should play instead. I'm not saying that's a guarantee. It's just something to keep an eye on, because the numbers are pretty encouraging. 5 goals, 3 assists in 21 appearances, 0.83 goals and assists per 90 minutes, and Belgium will be favourites for this group. Now, the Croatia game won't necessarily be easy in match day 3, but in match day 1 and 2, they've got Canada and Morocco. They can definitely get goals in that game. So keep an eye on what is said about Eden Hazard. I'm sure he'll probably be fine, but if he's not, I would definitely be looking at Trossard for an absolute bargain price of 5.5. It's worth saying that if Hazard is fit, he wouldn't necessarily be as much of a kind of bargain player, but at 8 million, he probably is a little bit underpriced compared to someone like Kevin De Bruyne, and he could be an option as well. So keep an eye on that spot. I don't know quite how Belgium are going to do. Obviously, a bit like England in the past, you know, this team has been called the golden generation. They haven't really won anything up until this point, and maybe this is going to be the last World Cup where we see this group of players, but I still think there's a few goals in there for them in match day 1 and 2 at least, maybe in 3 as well. And so if you can afford it and Hazard's fit, 8 million could be okay. If not, Trossard's a bargain. So I think some people might say that Otamendi is a little bit of a risky pick because he's not absolutely nailed on. Argentina usually play with a back 4, so they could play Lisandro Martinez at left centre-back and then Christian Romero at right centre-back. But when you look at Otamendi's minutes in recent games, they've been pretty good. Like in World Cup qualification, for example, he played every single game from the start, apart from one, and in that game he was suspended because of yellow card. So he played 90 minutes in every game, apart from the yellow card one I mentioned, then 81 minutes against Uruguay, 82 minutes against Bolivia. He played in the, the UEFA Cup of Champions against Italy for 90 minutes. So a lot of people maybe don't think that he should be starting, but I guess it's not up to them, it's up to the manager. And he has been starting quite regularly. He's been in the squads in most of those games. He's been playing 90 minutes. And when you look at Argentina, I think they're looking like a pretty strong side. I think a lot of people have got them down to at least get into the semi-finals, if not the final. And 5 million is about as cheap as it gets to get into that defence. A lot of the other players are a bit more expensive. So I think at 5 million, he could be a bit of a bargain. Like you look at those matches they've got to play. Obviously got Lewandowski for Poland, could cause some problems, but there's no reason why they can't get 1 to 2 clean sheets at least in the group stages. He has got a bit of goal threat. He's not necessarily a massive goal scorer, but in 92 appearances he has got 4 goals, 2 assists as well. So you never know. He could get you a defensive return one end and maybe an attacking return the other end. It just comes down to whether he's definitely going to start, but recent minutes at least point towards that could happen. But I guess because of the quality of the other players they've got, there is always a chance that he might miss out at some point. So next up is Steven Bergwijn, who's listed as a 7 million midfielder but should play up front for the Netherlands. They're another team a bit like Belgium that do stick with a back 3. It's almost like a 5-2-1-2 with 2 forwards. One of them will definitely be Depay. It's just about who will partner him, and it looks like it will probably be Bergwijn. So to have someone that's out of position, who's also a nice price, could be a decent option. I think Netherlands are probably favourites for that group. Their hardest game, I would say, is in match day 1 against Senegal. The Ecuador and Qatar games are probably going to be a bit easier, but depending on when you're going to wildcard, you may just want someone that you can carry the whole way through anyway. And for the midfielders that I've checked within the game, for 7 million or less, there's not too many better options than Bergwijn. So I really like him. I think Netherlands are going to do well and score plenty of goals too. His record's not bad. 24 appearances, 7 goals, 2 assists. That's a goal and assist per 90 minutes and 0.5. So not quite as good as some of the other players on the list. But in terms of midfielders for that price, there's not too many better options. I looked at recent games. So in the Nations League, he started 4 games, got 2 goals in those. Recent friendlies against Denmark, he played from the start, 77 minutes, got 2 goals. Against Germany, he came on for 32 minutes, got a goal in that. So his record recently for the Netherlands has been pretty good. And I would say leaving the Premier League has probably been a good thing for him as well. He's been able to play much more regular football. So I really like him. He's in my team right now. I don't see too many better £7 million or below midfielders, but if you think there's one out there, let me know in the comments below. So Diogo Costa is the only goalkeeper on this list at just 5 million and one of the cheapest ways into that Portugal defence. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't want to consider other players from that team. Obviously, João Cancelo is a defender, very attacking, but he's 6 million. So if you just want to get into those kind of clean sheets and you want to spend as little as possible, Diogo Costa could be the one. And Portugal are a fairly strong side. I think they're going to be favourites for the group. I had a look at what the odds are of winning the World Cup, and Brazil are top, then Argentina, then France. Portugal are 8. So they're ahead of teams like Belgium, Denmark, Croatia, Uruguay, Switzerland. fairly strong side that should keep 1 or 2 clean sheets in the group stages, or at least have a good chance. If you want a goalkeeper from one of the top teams, but you don't want to pay the kind of 5.5 or 6 million, Diogo Costa is probably the one. And lastly, we've got Khazri from Tunisia, who's listed as a 4.5 million midfielder, but if he plays, he should play up front. So he's one of those players that could be out of position. Now, I've looked at the recent minutes. There were quite a few squads that he wasn't in. He had a bit of an injury as well. So I don't know if he's 100% nailed. I guess if you're a Tunisian fan and you're watching this, let me know in the comments below, or if you've watched them a lot. I've read different reports from different people who think that he probably will play, he might play, he'll definitely play. So it's not guaranteed, but at 4.5 million, it's not a massive risk. He has taken penalties for Tunisia before as well. But again, when I went and looked at the last 3 to 4 penalties, there's a few different players that have taken them. So that's not guaranteed. It's also worth noting that Tunisia are one of the lowest ranked sides in the tournament, and they're definitely going to struggle to get out of this group, having to play Denmark and France. But when you've got a player that's just 4.5 that could play up front, you can't really complain, right? You can't expect the world at that kind of price. So having put my side together yesterday, first draft, I did say that, you know, maybe Sané or Musiala I might look to downgrade, and if I can get a starting forward that's listed as a midfielder for 4.5 that then is going to let me upgrade, say, Richarlison to Neymar, whoever it might be, it could be worth it. So it's all going to depend on how you spread your funds around, but at 4.5 million you could have an out of position player on your hands. There we go. They are 10 of the most potentially valuable players for World Cup 2022 Fantasy. If you've got any thoughts about the players I've mentioned, leave a comment below. Of course, if you think there's any other players out there that are absolute bargains, do let me know in the comment section below as well. If you haven't already checked out the Opta Million, there's a link in the description below. Completely free to play, really easy to enter, potentially £1 million up for grabs. So make sure you do that as well. Otherwise, give the video a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Plenty more fantasy content to come for the World Cup ahead of the deadline on Sunday. Otherwise, I'll catch you soon.